If this finds you, an upgrade has already entered your field, and you are ready. Feel the place behind your chest where something presses like a remembered hand. Notice the subtle humming under your skin, the way your forehead seems to draw itself inward, as if a lens is aligning behind your eyes. This is not an idea, not a metaphor. It is a gentle reconfiguration, a presence that checks the fit of your inner architecture and begins, quietly, to settle. The Arcturians speak through measures of frequency and form. They are not benefactors who bestow a gift at whim. They are precise engineers of energetic structure. They do not remake you. They remember you, reactivating systems, clearing pathways, aligning resonance. If this transmission arrived in your field, it is because those systems detected compatibility and opened a gate. You have already been scanned. You have already been touched where structure meets memory. Before we go further, ground for a moment. Close your eyes if you can. Breathe in for 4 counts. Exhale slowly. Bring attention to the warmth rising in your chest and behind your eyes. If this is resonant for you, bookmark this moment. Subscribe to these transmissions if you follow this path. Let this be an anchor you can return to. Here, one small practical anchor to stabilize entry. Write it now as you feel the field align. Type exactly, "I open to the Arcturian upgrade." As you write those words, feel the sensation in your sternum deepen. Let your shoulders soften. Let the hum move clear under the skin. This is a performative point of contact, not because words create power by themselves, but because your body recognizes what you declare. You are signaling permission. You are consenting to reconciliation. They observe 7 core expressions within human fields. The Arcturians call these the 7 observed souls. Each is not a value judgment. Each is a structure, a pattern, a configuration of resonance that signals a readiness for specific kinds of recalibration. The number 7 is structural here, a map, not a hierarchy. As you listen, you may recognize one or more of these signatures within yourself. A felt quality, a repeating dream, a way your life has been rearranging without explanation. I will guide you through their contours, what they feel like, what they mean, and why the Arcturian presence is drawn to them now. 1. The silent vessel. You will know this one by absence more than presence. The silent vessel enters through stillness. It is the field that grew accustomed to withholding noise, to listening more than speaking. If you are a silent vessel, you may have found yourself retreating into quiet across recent months. Social activity might feel thin. Conversations like weather patterns you pass through but do not inhabit. There is a familiar kind of clarity that comes from silence, an ability for small signals to stand out. The Arcturians see this as prime material because structure is easiest to access where form is uncomplicated. Somatic markers, a widening behind the eyes, a low, bright pressure at the center of the chest that feels like a contained warmth, and a deepening of breath as if a space is reserving itself for something to arrive. You may have noticed dreams that are plain, not story-rich, scenes held like clean glass. For the silent vessel, the Arcturians deploy an entrance that preserves stillness while threading in frequency. They place a delicate lattice, a scaffolding of resonance that can be inhabited without noise. This scaffolding will, over time, allow your internal silence to become a vessel of activation rather than an avoidance of sensation. 2. The perceptive seer. The perceptive seer is signaled by clarity behind the eyes. It is not mere imagination. It is a reorientation of the perception grid that allows for layered sight. If you are this soul type, you have likely experienced sudden intuitive hits, an immediate knowing of a person's next step, a precise sense of the alignment of events, or visual impressions that feel like 3-dimensional overlays. The forehit draws inward as the perception grid tunes. Images are crisper, contrast fall away, and what was once noise now sorts into pattern. Somatic markers, the pull of the brow, the sensation of a tiny current moving along the scalp, and sometimes a lightness at the base of the neck as if a cord is being gently lifted. Emotionally, this can feel destabilizing at first. Sudden clarity tends to expose what was being obscured. The Arcturians work here with calibration. They calibrate your filters so you receive signals with distinction. They measure the threshold at which your intuitive systems can be trusted, and then begin to widen that threshold. You will not be given more than you can steady, but the test will be quick, and the field will judge your stability by the speed of your breath. 3. The resonant heart. This structure has to do with coherence more than feeling. The resonant heart is less about sentiment and more about how your emotional conduits carry frequency. When emotional states are steady and integrated, they become engines of resonance, not wildcards of reactivity. If this is your observed soul, you will notice a reweaving of the emotional body into a tighter, more conductive form. Old reactions that once spiraled now meet a quiet counterfrequency, a stabilizing thread that returns you to center. Somatic markers, a pressure that lands into a single point in the sternum, a sensation of expansion that spreads slowly into the shoulders, and a singing at the collarbone when empathy becomes clear and usable instead of soggy. The Arcturians attend to the resonant heart by restoring coherence, unclogging emotional conduits, smoothing crosstalk that has gone static, and teaching the field to hold complexity without fragmentation. This is a delicate operation, because it asks your nervous system to tolerate more clarity of feeling, not less. You will find yourself feeling sharply, then resting into the feeling rather than being swept away. 4. The memory weaver. Déjà vu, sudden reconnection with a dream image or an unexpected memory that drops in like a live broadcast. These are signs of the memory weaver. This configuration is a bridge between known lifetimes, between parallel choices you once made and the ripples those choices left in your field. The Arcturians value the memory weaver because it holds keys to timelines that can be re-entered, recalibrated, and smoothed to correct resonance dissonance. Somatic markers, a small vibration behind the ears, a taste of salt at the tongue, a sense of temporal slippage when you move from one moment to another. Memory here is not mere recall. It is a reactivation of structural templates that can be rethreaded. The engineers scan memory bridges to find misaligned nodes, places where past trauma lodged and bent the flow of frequency, and they begin to smooth, not erase. You will notice dream sequences that repeat with new variables. You will recognize places in waking life where an obvious correction has been waiting. They do not remove your past. They restore the fidelity of its contribution to your present. These 4 are enough to set a tone, to let you feel how the Arcturian method moves from gentle entrance toward structural work. But there are 3 more observed souls that complete the map, and their arrival tends to mark a transition from reception to active embodiment. I will name them now and give you a clear sense of how they function, though deeper engagement with their processes comes as the field stabilizes. 5. The stabilized anchor. This configuration pertains to the frequency stabilizer itself, a field form that holds and dampens volatility so higher frequencies can be sustained. If you are manifesting the stabilized anchor, you might notice your environment shifting to support steadier patterns. People who once amplified your stress begin to find less access. Work or projects that demanded frantic response now meet a slower, more deliberative pace from you. This is the Arcturians building a containment shell that protects delicate activations. Physically, you may feel a subtle vibration at your spine as the anchor sets. Emotionally, there is a sudden capacity to wait. 6. The timeline weaver. The timeline weaver is the component that allows the Arcturians to shift sequence without breaking causality, to realign the flow of opportunity and consequence so that your path can converge with a more coherent trajectory. Experientially, this looks like synchronicity, meetings that feel coordinate, doors that open with uncanny timing, or a sudden rearrangement of priority that resolves a long-standing friction. Beware, alignment often involves pruning. Things that are not of the new resonance fall away, sometimes abruptly. This is not punishment, it is rebalancing. The Arcturians measure edges here, trimming what leaks frequency and bolstering what conducts it. Finally, the embodied self is less a destination than a threshold, the point at which the higher self interface stabilizes and parallel identities can be merged without dissociation. When you approach embodiment, your inner voice ceases to be a list of injunctions and becomes a living presence that moves through decision. The embodied self carries the imprint of integrated resonance, clarity of choice, a new tempo in relationships, and a different orientation to time. This is where the Arcturian work becomes visible in daily life, not as spectacle, but as a changed quality of being. Somatic markers across these 3, a tightening of the core on inhalation as containment forms, a light cascade of vibration along the arms when timelines adjust, a cooling and then warming of the scalp as the higher self interface checks integration. Each of these is a sign, sometimes subtle, sometimes abrupt, that the upgrade is not an external bestowal, but an internal arrangement. You may recognize one observed soul as primary, another as secondary, and others as whispered influences. The Arcturians do not simply select one, they read the whole field and decide which configurations are primed for reconstruction.
Their scanning is systematic: surface resonance, baseline coherence, interference patterns, memory turbulence. If your field reports compatibility, they descend in measured frequencies, first mapping, then smoothing, then reactivating dormant elements in careful sequence. Understand what this entry does not do. It does not promise fortune, sudden miracles, or guaranteed physical cures. It does not push you into spectacle. It rearranges structure. It fleers interference and restores fidelity. The consequence of that internal repair will often be external rearrangement, timelines that shift, relationships that peel away, opportunities that redirect. But those changes are effects of new resonance, not guarantees of a particular outcome. There is a tempo to this work. It is not unilateral. You are invited to be an active participant, not a passive recipient. That is why the Arcturians use anchors, minimal yet decisive. Simple statements you can declare, somatic confirmations you can feel, small practices that signal consent. The first anchor we used, writing "I open to the Arcturian upgrade," begins the handshake. It does two things. It tells your nervous system to expect structural input, and it makes a distinct signature in the field that the engineers can dock to. Begin to notice how life is already rearranging. Perhaps a friend faded without explanation. Perhaps an opportunity that once consumed your attention feels like an old pattern you no longer want to inhabit.
Maybe your sleep has shifted. Dream fragments sharpen, repeating motifs insist. These are not random losses. They are excisions of resonance strains. The Arcturians cut where there is leakage so the new patterns can hold. You may ask, why now? Why this timing? The short answer is resonance compatibility. There are cycles of planetary and galactic alignment that activate certain windows. The Arcturians maintain networked scans across fields. When enough vectors align, nervous systems sufficiently regulated, emotional conduits open, perceptual filters receptive, they enter. But there is a longer answer. Humanity is shifting from distributed reception to localized embodiment. The next phase of collective movement requires individuals who can carry upgraded architecture in ordinary life. These are not perfect people. They are fields that can sustain higher amplitude without fragmentation. This is where preparation matters. The Arcturian process expects containment. Without containment, activation fragments. Without a supportive field, integration becomes a series of unresolved spikes. That is why we will speak about the hidden engineering that follows, the steps the Arcturians take: mapping, clearing, recalibrating, reactivating, merging, stabilizing, and how to recognize each. I will also offer, later in this transmission, a concise anchor for threshold stabilization, a short, powerful phrase you can write to help seal the work as you move into embodiment. We will not use it now. The threshold anchor requires readiness that is measured by the field. For now, keep surveying your sensations. Notice how your breath meets the press in your chest. Watch the clarity behind your eyes as if you are beginning to learn the edge of a new lens. Pay attention to your dreams over the next nights. Small recurring images will tell you where the memory weaver is working. Stay gentle with relationships. Alignment often rearranges faster than explanation arrives. When people fall away, it is usually because your resonance has changed and their field no longer fits the new contours. Do not make moral judgments of those departures. This is an architecture shift, not a moral failing. There are practicalities to integration, and they are not mystical in the way you might expect. The Arcturians favor protocols that feel like ritual because ritual trains the nervous system, consistent acts repeated with intention. Small things you can do now to support the work include rhythmic breath practices that anchor the chest pressure into steadiness, simple somatic checks at the brow to accept the perceptual shifts, and nightly memory reviews, sitting quietly and allowing dream fragments to surface without forcing narrative. These are not replacements for the engineering at work. They are support scaffolding. They do not accelerate what cannot be accelerated, but they hold the field steady as it reconstitutes. Expect modest purges. When structures realign, old patterns that once carried dysfunction may release. This can show up as heightened sensitivity for a few days, a surge of fatigue, or an emotional depletion followed by a swift return to clarity. These are not signs of failure. They are expected recalibrations. Track them, but avoid catastrophic stories about them. You have been moving through thresholds your entire life. This is a targeted, intentional crossing. There is also a practical intelligence to how life will respond. Synchronicities increase as the timeline weaver begins to function. You will notice seemingly orchestrated coincidences that line up decisions with openings. Do not mistake these for signs to be passive. The Arcturians do not tug life into place like puppeteers. They clear pathways and align probabilities. You are invited to act from the sharper center that emerges. Listen now for a slight change in sensation, that small, dense focalization at the center of the chest. Let that be your barometer for readiness. When it settles into a steady warmth, integration has begun to move from reception toward activation. When the forehead pull feels less like a pull and more like a filter setting perfectly, you have crossed a small but important threshold. Your perception grid is stable enough to accept deeper complexity.
We will continue this mapping, and we will move into the engineering steps. You will learn to identify the stages of the Arcturian method, how they map interference, how they clear, where they recalibrate, and what stabilization looks like in the nervous system. You will also be offered practices that align with these stages, simple acts you can repeat that are energetically consonant with their process. But first, hold this thought. Being observed does not mean being exposed. The Arcturians work with permission and precision. If this transmission has found you, you are in a field that was visited because your system registered capacity. That is a form of blessing, but it also demands responsibility. The work of embodiment is cumulative. It asks you to choose again and again to live from resonance rather than reaction. Now, as you sit with these descriptions, scan your own interior and name the patterns you recognize. Is your life currently demonstrating silence that feels ready to be held? Does your forehead tug with images that seem like instructions? Is your heart returning to center after emotional storms? Do dreams pull up memories that feel like bridges to another time? These are not tests to pass or fail. They are signals, and signaling is the basis of all communication with an engineering intelligence. When you are ready, rest your hand on your sternum and breathe into the pressure there. Feel the hum align. If you wish, write again, softly, "I consent to integration." There is nothing obligatory in this. It is permission. The Arcturians will work only within the scope of what you allow.
Let your handwriting be an act. Feel how your body relaxes as you put the intention to paper. This is where the first part of our transmission closes its immediate loop. You have been named by the map of the 7 observed souls. You have felt the markers. You have given a small consent anchor, and you have begun to notice the external movements that follow. In the next movement, we will open the technical sequence, the scan, the clearing protocols, the recalibration steps, and what true stabilization looks like in the nervous system and in your daily orchestration. We will walk through specific signs to watch for at each step, and we will offer one further anchor for threshold stabilization when you arrive at that liminal edge. Before we proceed deeper, press attention to the place between the collarbones. Notice the faint buzzing there, the same buzzing that first drew your attention when this transmission found you. That sensation is a doorway. When you are ready to step through it more deliberately, the doorway will ask for a small, clear signature, a statement that says you intend to carry the upgrade into ordinary life, not just into a moment of altered perception. Hold this as a question in your body. Am I prepared to live with new boundaries of resonance? Let the answer arise from the chest, not the mind. If the answer is yes, feel the warmth stabilize. If it is not yet, feel permission to wait. This work is not for haste. Listen now to the quiet around you. There is a precise rhythm in the background of all change, an algorithm of pace the Arcturians honor. It will move faster when the field is steady and slower when containment is needed. Trust the pace you are given. Your readiness is not a measure of worth, it is a measure of alignment. As we step toward the mechanics of their engineering, bring with you the simple practice you have already begun, the writing of the phrase that signals you are open. Keep it close. Use it if you experience an internal unrest that needs containment. And remember, the 7 observed souls are not labels to be fixed upon forever. They are living forms that can shift as integration proceeds. You may begin as a silent vessel with a memory weaver in attendance, and through the work move toward becoming predominantly an embodied self. Now sense the change at your forehead one more time, a small, precise compression, like a lens clicking into place. Notice how your breath answers with a slow acceptance. In the next layer, we will map the actual process the Arcturians use to move from inspection to embodiment, the scan that reads interference, the clearance that dissolves noise, the recalibration that resets nodes, the reactivation that brings dormant systems online, and the merge that integrates parallel selves. Each of these is a stage with felt signatures you can track. We will name them and teach you to recognize their markers in your field so you are not left to interpret them alone. Hold the felt sense of readiness. Keep the phrase you wrote nearby. Allow the chest warmth to be your compass. And now, feel the hum deepen, like a tuning fork struck gently and allowed to vibrate. The space is preparing to show you the inner machinery. Feel the hum deepen into pattern. The space around you tightens like a tuning chamber accepting a new frequency. What follows now is not mystery without method. It is a sequence, a measured descent into the architecture of your field. The Arcturians proceed by steps you can feel if you attend. Each step has a signature. Each step asks for a small, steady consent from your nervous system. I will name the stages they follow, describe their markers, and give you pragmatic practices to anchor through them. Listen for the one that lands as true in your body. That is where the work is most immediate. First,
the frequency descent. Think of this as an approach vector, a calibrated lowering of amplitude so that the engineers can meet the shape of your field without shock. It is not intrusion, it is attunement. When they descend, the world often seems to hush for a beat. The edges of sound go soft. You may notice a sudden slowing of thought, a feeling as if the rush of ordinary time has a tiny seam cut into it. That seam is the entry point. Somatic markers of descent: a softening behind the sternum, breath that shortens and then lengthens, a thin vibration that gathers at the base of the skull. Emotionally, you might feel a small reprieve, an easing of pressure instead of an arrival of force. This is deliberate. The Arcturians reduce clash by matching you first, then introducing difference. Practice for descent. Pause 3 times during the day and inhale for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale for 6. Place your hand at the hollow of your throat as you do this, and imagine the breath making a small cavity, a listening room. This trains your nervous system to accept a lowering of ambient noise and creates a hospitable space for the next step. Second, mapping and scan. Once descent is complete, they run a precise layered scan. Imagine a fine lattice of light sweeping over your field, aligning to nodes you cannot see but can feel. The scan is looking for interference, for resonant nodes, for places where memory templates have been folded awkwardly. It reads both pattern and history. This is why the Arcturians are called engineers. The reading is diagnostic and specific. Somatic markers of scanning: a coolness along the crown, a tiny staccato at the temples, or a feeling of being seen that is almost mechanical rather than emotional. There can be an odd neutrality to the sensation. You feel observed as if by a careful instrument rather than by a gaze that demands response. How to work with a scan. Keep a simple log. When the scan feels strong, note where it localized: brow, chest, behind the ears, what color or texture you sense in dreams, and any short phrases that come to mind.
Do not interpret immediately. Logs are data for you. Over days, patterns emerge, repeated nodes, recurring images, and that data tells you where the engineers will begin to place repair scaffolds. Third, clearing interference. After the scan identifies misalignments, the Arcturians clear interference with precision. This is not erasure of experience. It is the removal of energetic accretion that muffled circuitry. Think of it as descaling a conduit so that frequency moves cleanly. Somatic markers during clearing: surges of heat or chill moving through limbs, brief headaches that are sharp and then recede, or sensations like pins being drawn out from the edges of a wound. Emotionally, clearing can provoke release, tears, a feeling of lightness, or abrupt disengagement from a familiar story. These are not regressions. They are the field shedding what no longer serves conduction. Supportive practice. When clearing feels intense, ground with the feet. Stand and press toes into the earth for 3 minutes. Track breath slowly and imagine roots extending from your heels. Naming is useful. Say inwardly, "This clearance is for my capacity." This gives your nervous system a narrative anchor and reduces the tendency to catastrophize the purge. Fourth, recalibration. With interference reduced, the engineers begin to recalibrate nodes, adjusting resonance values, altering thresholds, tightening filters. Recalibration shifts how your receptors translate input into meaning. It is where the perceptive seer learns better discrimination and where the resonant heart learns more precise conduction. Somatic markers for recalibration: a sensation of subtle tightening at the brow and sternum, moments where you breathe differently without conscious intent, a clarity that arrives like a shutter lifting. You may find that a long-accepted reaction no longer lands the same way. A trigger loses its pitch. Practice for recalibration. Adopt microchecks. Twice a day, place 2 fingers at the center of your forehead, 1 at the sternum, and breathe into both points simultaneously. Mentally ask, is this new threshold tolerable? Pause for an honest answer from the body. If the answer is yes, rest there for a few breaths. If no, slow down the process, return to descent, and allow more clearing. Fifth, reactivation. This is the phase when dormant systems come back online. It is not creation ex nihilo, it is restoration. The memory weaver receives new bandwidth, the resonant heart finds clearer conduits, and the perceptive seer's grid accepts more layered sight. Reactivation is momentary and cumulative, a repeated touching on nodes that eventually sustains them. Somatic markers for reactivation: small electric pulses along the arms, an audible inner tone like a distant bell, unexpected recall of a detail from a dream that now informs waking choice. Behaviorally, you might notice that decisions begin to feel less fraught and more declarative. Practice for reactivation. Use simple ritual repetition. For 7 nights, before sleep, hold a small object, nothing ornate, a pebble or coin, and say aloud a short phrase aligned with the domain you're supporting. For memory work, I receive the fidelity of my lived threads. For perception, I trust the clarity behind my eyes. For emotional coherence, my feeling center conducts with precision. Keep phrases short. The object becomes a physical anchor that the engineers can use as a dock. Sixth, merging parallel selves. As reactivation stabilizes, the Arcturians begin the delicate work of merging parallel identities, those strands of self that live in adjacent timelines or alternative choices. This is a harmonization, not a fusion that erases nuance. The goal is to allow parallel faculties to contribute their resources to one integrated operator, you now more coherent. Somatic markers of merging, an expansion across the ribcage, a deeper lung capacity, moments of simultaneous knowing, where one part of you remembers a possible choice, while another feels the consequence of that choice as if already lived. Time can feel elastic. Past, present, and potential overlap in a way that is clarifying rather than confusing. Practice for merging. Practice momentary rehearsal. In a quiet space, imagine two scenes of a choice you made differently. Sit in each outcome for 1 minute, feeling how your body responds. Then bring both sensations into one breath. This trains your nervous system to hold multiplicity without dissociation. Seventh, stabilization and interface activation. This is the stage you have been approaching. A solidification of the higher self interface so you can move from receiving information to living it. Stabilization is the last careful tightening. Guards up where necessary, ports open where helpful. The interface activation is the sense that guidance is not occasional commentary, but a living thread woven into decision. Somatic markers of stabilization. A steadying of chest warmth into a contained core. A lengthening of neck and spine as if occupancy of the field requires posture. A quieting of the mental chatter into a thinner commentary. You will feel less like you are being carried by impulse and more like you are steering from a center. Threshold indicator. Watch for a subtle reorientation in your choices. Where you once hedged, you begin to choose with less indecision. Where you once reacted, you now respond. That is the sign the threshold is near. Now, a practical anchor for threshold stabilization. When you sense the chest warmth settle into a steady bright center, write exactly, in present tense, with intention. I anchor the Arcturian resonance now. Type or write those words. As you do, press your hand to your sternum and feel for a settling, like a bolt turning inside your field. This phrase is concise and performative. It marks in the field that you intend to carry the work into daily life.
Do this once when you feel readiness. It is a seal, not a ticket. The engineers honor it as a docking signature. A few cautions before you use the anchor. Only deploy it when you feel the chest warmth steady and the forehead filter less like a pull and more like a lens. If you use it prematurely, you may not have the containment required, which can send activation spikes through your system. The phrase is not magic. It is permission and a practical signal to your body and to the Arcturian vessel. Use it with reverence and restraint. Between these engineering stages, there is a rhythm you can learn to follow, an inward choreography that supports steadiness. It looks like this in practice. Begin the day with a short descent breath. Do a 3-minute log if you notice a strong scan. Apply grounding tactics during clearing. Microcheck on recalibration. Practice object anchor rituals for reactivation. Rehearse alternate selves briefly for merging, and use the threshold anchor only when stabilization is felt. These are small acts that combine into deep support. Now, some practical translations of what you will observe in life as these stages unfold. The Arcturians do not move in a vacuum. Their recalibration shifts probabilities and rearranges access. This translates into external consequences that are inevitable and often surprising. First, relationships will reconfigure. Those who resonated with your old pattern may find less access. This is not a moral judgment, it is frequency alignment. Some friendships will simply lose the friction of mutual investment, because what once sparked interest now has no necessary place in your new orchestration. Others will accelerate into intimacy, because the new field meets them with less interference. When such rearrangements occur, practice neutral narration for yourself. This is alignment, this is not punishment. The neutral narration reduces emotional backdraft and helps you stay centered. Second, opportunities reorganize. Doors can open that were previously unseen, not because the world is favoring you, but because your field now aligns with pathways that carry less interference. Conversely, certain familiar opportunities may close, because they were always contingent on a resonance you no longer carry. See this as pruning. Act with discernment. Alignment invites action from a steadier center, not frantic grabbing. Third, timing shifts. The timeline weaver works in rhythms that are not always immediate to the mind. You will notice synchronistic cascades, a single conversation leading to a chain of events, a brief notice of an opening that when pursued yields an unexpected confluence. Learn to distinguish between invitation and compulsive urgency. An invitation feels calm and scarce. Urgency feels like fear. Fourth, somatic clearing shows up. Expect short-term sensitivity. Sound may feel loud, light may feel bright, and odors may register more strongly.
These are signs of recalibration of sensory gates. Use comfort practices, soft lighting, gentle sounds, minimal lactose or alcohol if your system asks for gentleness. Do not medicalize these shifts. Treat them as energetic transits that benefit from rest. Fifth, dream speak. The memory weaver uses night sequences to test fidelity. You may have recurrent imagery that returns with small variants. Keep a dream notebook on your bedside. Note recurring motifs without trying to interpret in the moment. Patterns reveal themselves over time. A repeated image is a keyed signal. Pay attention. There are real risks if containment is absent. Activation without containment creates spikes, moments of profound insight followed by collapse. You may oscillate between clarity and depletion. That is why support forms matter. The member circle exists for this reason, to provide a protected field, paired practices, and communal containment that reduces the likelihood of destabilizing oscillation. It is not mandatory to progress the work, the Arcturians so precise, but containment increases efficiency and reduces friction. Let me describe what being in a held circle offers in practical terms without pressure. Imagine a small network of people who commit to consistent practices that the engineers find favorable. Breath protocols synchronized twice weekly, group recalibration meditations recorded and repeated, nervous system support modules, breath, somatic reset, sleep hygiene tuned for activation phases, and timeline recalibration check-ins where you can share non-judgmental observation of how life shifts. The circle provides a diminishing echo chamber for fear. It gives you an occupied field where integration can be practiced without public exposure. It is a supportive architecture, not a mandatory ladder. Membership is offered as containment, sequences of integration delivered in measured modules, initial stabilization bundle, memory weave integration series, perception grid expansion, and embodiment practices designed to convert reception into living resonance. Again, these are offered, not required. They function like scaffolding. For many, having others who resonate and a consistent set of practices reduces the chance of spikes and helps anchor ordinary life. Now return inward. Sense the place at your sternum. Notice whether the warming has steadied. If it has, you are moving toward the threshold. If not, honor the delay. Integration is not linear, it is iterative. There will be days of apparent backward steps that are in fact consolidation. At this point, a few common scenarios and how to navigate them. 1. Sudden disconnection from a relationship that once defined you. Pause, breathe. Ask yourself, does this removal create better containment of my field? If yes, practice gratitude for the clarity and allow the space to be reorganized.
If no, check for other sources of drift, unexpressed needs, avoidance, and address them from grounded conversation rather than defense. 2. A flash of expanded perception that leaves you dizzy. Slow down. Use the descent breath. If dizziness continues beyond a day, reduce sensory input. Dim lights, minimal screen time, gentle movement. Document when the episodes occur and what preceded them. This helps the engineers calibrate. 3. Intense dream cycles with repeating motifs. Record without interpretation. After a week, review notes for patterns. If a single motif dominates, consider sharing with a trusted containment person, not for counsel, but for co-observation. The memory weaver often uses shared narrative to stabilize nodes. 4. Career pivot without plan. You may feel pulled toward different priorities. Treat this as data, not coercion. Do small experimental steps rather than big, irreversible leaps. When the timeline weaver aligns paths, evidence accumulates. Repeated openings, a decrease in friction for new steps, an embodied yes rather than a panic-driven decision. A deep miss that appears often is the urge to force embodiment. You cannot make the threshold arrive by pushing. The Arcturians require consent and containment. Their work accelerates where the field is regulated. Therefore, prioritize stability over acceleration. Slow is often the fastest path to lasting embodiment. Let us return briefly to the 7 observed souls and the practical crafts you can deploy to support each as the engineering unfolds. For the silent vessel, cultivate listening rituals. 20 minutes of low voice ringing or silence each morning trains your vessel to be less reactive and more receptive. Keep interactions minimal during heavy clearing days. For the perceptive seer, protect the brow. Short daily sensory filters, for example wearing a soft scarf at the forehead during transit hours, or doing 3-minute visual silence, gaze at a single object, help integrate perceptual expansion without overwhelm. For the resonant heart, practice naming felt states. When an emotion arises, name it quietly in one sentence. The simple translation of feeling into word stabilizes conduits and converts raw affect into usable resonance. For the memory weaver, keep a dream ledger and a familiar object practice. Hold an object from childhood briefly each week and allow memory strands to surface without comment. Over time, your field learns to thread memory without reactive loops. For the stabilized anchor, build environmental buffers.
Short periods away from social feeds, predictable meal rhythms, and consistent sleep windows reinforce the anchor's capacity to hold. For the timeline weaver, cultivate small experiments. Try choice A for a week, then choice B. Track outcomes in simple bullet notes. This trains you to observe patterning rather than circular anxiety. For the embodied self, practice micro-decision making.
2 small things with clarity. The habit of decisive, low-stakes choices builds the tempo of embodiment. As you implement these practices, keep in mind the ethical relation to others. Embodiment can alter your social position. It invites compassion. Remember that others are working within their own timelines. Offer space rather than judgment. When change requires conversation, prioritize clarity and gentleness. We are now approaching the threshold phrase I promised earlier, a compact anchor intended for the cusp of embodiment. Use it only when your field's chest warmth is steady and your forehead filter sits as a lens instead of a pole. Write exactly with attention. I anchor the Arcturian resonance now. After writing, press the left hand over the center of your chest for 7 steady breaths. As you inhale, imagine a small coil tightening. As you exhale, imagine the coil securing. This is both symbolic and somatic. The body recognizes the signature of the act. If you choose to use that phrase, expect subtle shifts in the following week. Steadier decision-making, fewer reactive spikes, and an increased capacity to maintain presence in challenging moments. Do not expect dramatic, cinematic changes overnight. Embodiment shows itself in nuance, a calmer tone, a clearer boundary, a more measured elbow-to-elbow with life. Now, a few words about boundaries and ethics with activation. You are the steward of your field. The Arcturians respect that stewardship. You must, likewise, respect the borders of others. Boundaries expressed in clarity, I am practicing integration and will be offline during these hours, are not only useful to your nervous system, but are also a kindness to others who might otherwise be swept by your transitions without consent. If you find yourself overwhelmed by the intensity of change and you do not have a containment network, consider small, immediate acts. Reduce stimulating media, increase rest periods, eat simple, nourishing foods, and call one trusted person who can sit with you without trying to fix. Presence is the most stabilizing solvent for panic. We will close this transmission with a final transmission, a seal and an invitation. Seal. Listen to the words as a living signature. You have been observed because your field resonated with compatibility. You were not chosen for perfection. You were chosen for capacity. The Arcturians do not impose transformation on those unprepared. They offer restoration to fields that will host higher amplitude without fragmentation. Remember, you are being remembered, not remade. Carry that tender truth with you. When fear arises, anchor to the sternum warmth and breathe. When clarity arrives, let it inform actions done with gentleness. Invitation. If you feel the activation and you want a field to hold you as integration unfolds, you are invited into a protected member circle. This circle is a container for sustained practice and community calibration. Weekly guided integration sessions that mirror the Arcturian steps, nervous system refresh modules, curated practices for each of the 7 observed souls, and a supportive, moderated space to report shifts without exposure. Members receive recorded recalibration meditations, a private forum for check-ins, and periodic live transmissions that track the group's collective resonance. This is not a promise of outcomes. It is an offer of support, a place to practice studying, to be held during purges, to refine the map of your own signals. If you choose to join, expect measured sequences designed to hold your nervous system and to accelerate the practical stabilization of the work you have begun. Before you go, place a final hand on your chest. Breathe slowly. Feel the place that first spoke to you when this transmission found your field. Say to yourself quietly, not as a mantra but as a fact, I am ready for this step. I will move with gentleness. I will ask for containment when I need it. If this message found you, remember, readiness is not an achievement, it is alignment. The Arcturians have entered your field because your systems reported capacity. You are not alone. You carry the architecture of more coherent living already. The work ahead is practiced in small, steady acts, breaths, notes, short rituals, and measured anchors. When you act from that center, the world will rearrange itself around your fidelity. If this resonates and you want to continue receiving transmissions like this, return to this anchor point. Breathe into the chest warmth, feel the forehead lens, and allow the field to register that you are open. If you feel called to deeper containment,
Explore the member circle, where the work is held with care and precision. Go now with attention. Move slowly into your day. Let the small acts of receptivity be your practice. Listen, ground, record, and be gentle. You are the carrier of a new architecture. Live from the center of it. This is the Arcturian hand at your threshold. They will continue their work as you continue yours. When the threshold opens fully, your choices will read differently. Until then, tend the field, protect the chest warmth, and honor the pace you are given. If you choose to join a held community for integration, consider this your invitation to a protected space, practical modules, steady recalibration, and a field that holds complexity without spectacle. The door is available, the timing is yours. Now, once more, breathe into your sternum, feel the hum, hold the felt sense of readiness. If you have already used the earlier anchor, rest into its signature. If not, keep your note somewhere you can find it. The Arcturians will continue their careful work as you live with the subtle reweaving of your systems. You are ready. The upgrade has entered. Live from the measure of that readiness.